Hello, everybody. My name is Caleb Boat, and today I am joined by two distinguished University of Akron accounting alumni. You guys can go ahead and introduce yourselves.
Hi, I'm Susan Markel. I was the class of '85.
And I'm Bill Keeven. I was the class of '68.
All right, great, and let's hop right into it. So, a little bit about yourselves, about your backgrounds, early life, and then how you kind of became interested in accounting.
I grew up in Worcester, so Wayne County. So even though now I live in the Washington, D.C. area, I am pretty much homegrown here. So that's what, in part led me to Akron. Sure. Accounting, I had a high school class called bookkeeping with Miss Hill. She made it interesting, but that was basic. And then I had a very good friend, and he had an older brother who was working at Ernst & Young in the audit department. So I kind of heard from that, saw from that, and saw that it was a pretty cool job, and it was an area where you could certainly get a job. So that led me first to accounting.
And I grew up in New York on Long Island. I had an accounting course as a senior in high school. I had a great accounting teacher, Lenny Mandel, and he was terrific, and he really got me interested in accounting. So when I came to the University of Akron, it seemed like accounting would be a good opportunity for me. I had considered political science, but I switched to accounting when I determined that in the long run was going to be better, more interesting, and more suitable to me.
I'm going to kind of skip over Akron a little bit, and we're going to go straight to your career path after college. So what did that look like for you guys?
Well, I started out with Arthur Andersen when I got out of school, and I got out of school in December '68, and I started in the Columbus, Ohio office, and Arthur Andersen had been mentioned throughout my accounting courses here at the university, so I was particularly interested in the firm. And after being with the firm in Columbus for 5 days or so, I was sent out of town to Lorain, Ohio, to work on something that I'd never heard of before, a government contract and consulting matter. And I was basically the new kid on the block, working with some people out of Chicago and some well-known lawyers. I spent 10 months there. I got incredible training skill, developed a lot of relationships, including one with a lawyer who is 87 years old now, and we still work together periodically. My career has been very interesting to me, and very enjoyable, in fact.
It sounds like it. Sounds like you were bouncing around there too, a lot of places and a lot of people.
Well, I was. I also, during the 5 years I was gone from Anderson before I came back, and I was invited back by somebody I'd worked with previously. I was in industry. I had accounting positions, a controllership position on the West Coast. For Masonite Corporation, and I was in Masonite's headquarters in Chicago, where I did a lot of their SEC reporting work as well. So I had a broad range of skills and experience that went well beyond the government contracting, but it was the foundation of it all was the accounting training that I had, the accounting and the auditing training, for which I'm very thankful.
Susan, over to you.
Sure. So I started my career at Arthur Andersen, and I first became exposed to Arthur Andersen, certainly heard about them all throughout here at school. But when I was here, they had the Toastmasters Club, which I guess doesn't exist anymore. But Toastmasters was a public speaking club, and they would have periodic contests that were either hosted and sponsored by some of the Big Eight, which was what it was at the time, or some of the industries. And I happened to participate and won the one where Arthur Andersen was the judge. So that kind of connected me more, and as well with the partner who was one of the judges. I then interned with them the following year, and then joined with them full time. I went through school in 3.5 years because I did do summers, like I know a lot of the folks at Akron do. But I started with them full time in the fall of '84, and did audits for a number of years. Also did some government contracting work and some litigation support. I was in Cleveland with them until '87 when I moved to D.C., kind of had an opportunity if I wanted to do something different. And, D.C. sounded like a manageable big city, right? Bigger certainly than here, but not so big as New York or Chicago. And then went in the audit practice, did government contracting work as well. And I went there September '87. And then interestingly, Bill joined or transferred to DC in February of 2018.
1988.
Yeah, I'm
yeah.
about 30 years off
Yeah,
there
yeah.
on that.
Close enough for government work.
That's right. But it was pretty cool to go there from Akron and then have somebody, you know, of Bill's stature coming in, you know, to lead the practice there a few months later. So that was an instance of small world.
Very interesting. It's nice that, Bill, you had that Akron foundation, and it made you guys cross paths over in D.C.,
Yeah.
so all roads lead back to Akron. That's
Yeah.
great. How would you say that your audit base helped you in the beginning of your career and helped you do that transition to consulting?
Well, you know, I started out with in the government contract consulting area, and I should note that government contract consulting at Anderson was part of the audit practice, actually, because generally speaking, certainly when I was running the practice for Anderson on a national basis, we hired people who were coming out of school with accounting degrees. We taught them how to audit, at least when I was, at least like in the Washington office in particular, we taught them how to audit. And then we taught them government contract consulting work, so audit was foundational, okay? When I started, as I mentioned to you earlier, my first engagement with Anderson had nothing to do with auditing. I didn't do any auditing for 10 months with Anderson. Most of my work, by the way, I never worked for an audit senior for 10 months. I worked for partners and managers on that matter for American Shipbuilding. It wasn't until I was invited back to the firm by the partner who headed up the government contracts practice for the firm at the time that I got back into government contracting, and I insisted. I said a couple of things. First of all, if I come back, I want to be a partner, and I don't think you'll make me a partner unless I audit, and I want to be a partner in 1982, and this was in November '78. I came back to the firm in January of '79. I was given audit work to do. It was interesting audit work. GTE, Automatic Electric, Chamberlain Manufacturing Corporation, any Homeowners Warranty Corporation, which is a small nonprofit. Any number of other things, and I continued to do the government contract work. I became a partner. I got transferred to Houston for a while, for a few years. I did some auditing down there, then a lot of litigation work. Then I took over the government contracts practice on a firm-wide basis in '85. So I got transferred to Washington finally when that was resolved in January of '88. From there on, it was a combination of government contract consulting and auditing and litigation work. By the way, a lot of this involved expert testimony, by the way, I should say, and any number of other interesting cases.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's cool to hear. Expert witness is definitely kind of a niche field that a lot of students probably would like to hear more about.
Again, it's table stakes. You got to know the accounting. And then auditing, you're coming in and you're seeing a lot of different clients and you're always learning something new, whether it's you start out as a first-year auditor and you're auditing cash. And some people might think that's really, really boring and why am I doing it? But it's a building block. And so each thing that you do, you're learning more, you're seeing different industries, you're talking to different people, you're moving up in the ranks. And then when you switch over to consulting, and I had that big government service in the middle of mine, but you're kind of always doing the same thing, but you're growing and doing it bigger and broader and deeper. And I think when you go from an audit, you're helping the company, but you have to stay independent. I was at the government where you are totally independent. In fact, you're a counter to the people who are across the way. You either think something is wrong and you're trying to figure it out. And if people did things wrong, you want them to own up for it and to essentially pay for it. But then when you go to the consulting side, and when I switched, it was from government to consulting. It was largely doing what I did at the government, but now on the other side, learning the case, helping the client get through those very difficult issues. So in that point, taking it from a different frame, it was actually trying to help them get through it. And I view consulting, too, as like you're taking on their problems. So their problem already becomes my problem, and that's what I'm going to lose sleep over. And hopefully you can take that pressure off the other side and get them through the process. And one thing Bill left out about his consulting and expert witness testimony experience, which I think is so unique out there, is he is one of the few expert witnesses who has actually signed an audit opinion, which is really, really valuable.
Now you're in consulting, both high consulting. What does your day-to-day look like these days? I know a lot of people, students included, think consulting like you're just giving advice. Like, what are you doing on the day-to-day?
Well, first of all, I should recognize that I'm 78 years old, so my day-to-day is a lot different than it used to be, okay?
Very true.
I'm not out there doing all the things that I did. I'm not living on the airplanes, making the speeches, writing the articles, and trying to deal with the client issues like I used to. But what my day-to-day used to look like, if that, to the extent that that's relevant, is it could be pretty darn busy. It could be very busy. In fact, I'm telling you something that I was told, I accepted. I was told that the last fiscal year of Arthur Andersen, I was the most billable partner in the audit and business advisory practice in the country. Now, that's not necessarily good, except I had enough work and I didn't have enough people to help me, necessarily. And I had a lot of people. But we had a very successful practice. But oftentimes, day-to-day work was you did client work. You sometimes went out to lunch with clients or prospective clients. You had to be out in the marketplace, so to speak, to let clients know who you were and doing things that got attention. So many times, most of the time, I was being, at least in the government contracts matters, I was being engaged by lawyers who were representing big contractors. Those lawyers had to know who to come to.
Susan, what about you?
So day to day, busy with client work for sure. And that could be several smaller clients. So you've got, a menu of different clients and different issues that come up, or very frequently, sometimes there are cases that I call the can't breathe case because you're just working around the clock and you literally can't breathe. You can't stop because these are issues that are so important to the company to get through. I mean, they've got people's livelihoods at stake. There may be something that they're questioning the actions of the CEO or the CFO or anybody down the chain. You're also dealing with auditors because their conduct can come into play too. So again, these things are very, very important for the client that you have, for the people that are around it, and then also for the team that you've got working on it. So, a typical project for me might be something small where I've got one or two people working with me, or on the larger, again, can't breathe cases, you've got 20. So, the involvement changes every day with that, but you're out there, you're dealing with the client when their issues come up. If you look at your phone and you see them calling, you pick it up. And I think that's part of it. You are on 24/7 potentially, because if you have a client and they're counting on you to get them out of a difficult situation, you've got to pick up.
For you, Bill, I have here that you were involved in the termination of the A-12 combat aircraft program and the NYC Time payroll scandal. Can you talk a little bit about those?
It was an aircraft that was being developed. It was under development. It was also being produced, which maybe is a problem because maybe you ought to hold off on producing it until it's fully developed. That created some of the issues, okay? Our client was primarily General Dynamics in this case, and this was a very complex contract, and it was for the Navy. The Air Force was also involved. There were problems both within the Navy and the Air Force with respect to recognizing what the problems were. Primarily the Navy I should focus on. But General Dynamics had its issues too, unfortunately. But we're not talking about fraud or anything like that. We're talking about a dispute regarding performance of the contract. And eventually the contract was so complicated, it fell behind schedule. It was substantially over cost. Vice President Dick Cheney started looking into this and got upset about it. And I think he was vice president at the time. Yeah, and he demanded that the contract be terminated for default. Now, that means when a government contract is terminated for default, everything lays on the contractor, because supposedly the contractor defaulted. The contractor wants to get gets the termination converted to a termination for convenience, in which case the contractor gets paid for the costs it incurred up to that point, plus wind down costs and so on. So obviously General Dynamics was dissatisfied with the default termination, and it went for a convenience termination. The government fought that. It took 23 years to get the matter resolved. Okay. With respect to the City Time scandal, that involved fraud, and the city was being billed for costs that weren't incurred. Consulting fees were being increased unjustifiably, and the city was being billed for things that hadn't been done. And this apparently became apparent to some people in New York, raised some questions about it. Pete Baraha, who was, trying to remember, he was the U.S. attorney for either the Southern or the Eastern District in New York. I'm sorry, I can't remember which, but he's now with one of the big law firms, I believe. He initiated an investigation. He eventually indicted SAIC, at least 3 people went to jail for as long as 20 years. Um, when SAIC's management, top-level people realized there was really something going on here, they hired legal counsel, one of the top law firms in the country, and we were engaged by that law firm. And our responsibility was, we didn't go out and do a lot of looking at documents and so on, talking to a lot of people. We took the information that they had at the time. We talked to certain people within SAIC. We consulted with the counsel, and we advised the board as to what to do, along with legal counsel. And eventually, SAIC settled for something along $500 million. And as I mentioned to you, several people, including, I believe, some people from who work for who were employed by New York, as well as I think at least one SAIC person, maybe somebody else too. People went to jail for a while. I know there were several people sentenced to 20 years, so it was pretty significant. And I think SAIC is an outstanding company. Everybody can have problems. You need to understand that. Things happen, and I think they responded appropriately. I think they wanted to get it resolved, and they wanted to make sure it doesn't happen again. And I'm pretty confident that it won't.
Susan, I have here for you Chief Accountant of the Division of Enforcement at the SEC. What was the most interesting case you handled there?
So again, I was the SEC for 15 years. The last 5.5, I was the chief accountant, and it was a really interesting period. That was right around 2003. So we were coming through the aftermath of WorldCom and Enron, and those types of things. And as Bill talked about, a case that took 23 years. Now, SEC doesn't take quite that long, but it can be 5, 6 years. I mean, these are not short-term things. So Enron and WorldCom were still coming through on that. At the SEC too, which SEC is an entity that doesn't bring criminal action, so the SEC can't ever throw somebody into jail. But we would work with the DOJ a lot, or U.S. attorneys' offices, and often help them build their case. And probably one of the more interesting things was on the WorldCom case, where people did go to jail for 20 plus years, was some of the data that we got. Because again, back then, as I was at the SEC asked for documents via a letter. Please provide us all documents related to whatever. And all documents means all documents. So that can be emails, that could be any computer files you have, that could be notes that people have. And historically, we would, way back then, get boxes. And so it would not be uncommon for the SEC's hallway to be just packed with bankers' boxes full of documents, 5 high, 2 deep. And you'd have to go through them. Now it's electronic. For the most part. But back then, one of the things that we got in that case was voicemails. And there was a voicemail that ended up being used in the trial of Bernie Ebbers, who was the former CEO of WorldCom, and it was a call between he and the CFO, and they talked about, I believe it was the CFO talking to the CEO about the quarterly results, and one of the comments was, yeah, that's with the accounting fluff in it. And accounting fluff, I guess if you look at WorldCom, they moved $800 million from the income statement to the balance sheet in five quarters in a row to make themselves look better. So that was just a pretty interesting find. I remember staying late that night as the CD-ROM came in. That's again how they came in with the voicemails, and listened to everyone, and then found that one, and that pretty much made staying late.
Worth it.
Yes.
Yes. Sounds
Yeah.
like a little more than fluff. It's
Yes.
a lot of money.
Yeah, but it was a great job, great position to have. And we always tried to get it right. I mean, Bill said sometimes it's, there aren't cases there, and in those cases you would hope the government would stop and say, okay, we got it. We agree there's nothing here. And so that's what we always tried to do. And now on the other side, now we're saying government, go away.
So we're going to switch gears a little bit, and we're going to move to accounting in general. So what do you think about the state of accounting today, and with AI and technology rapidly advancing, where do you see it going?
Companies are going to be implementing AI in various contexts, and there are going to be internal control issues. There are going to be problems with that. Management has to understand what they're doing. They have to have capable people installing it, and they have to have the controls in place, and they have to have the appropriate corporate governance in place to manage this. And I think boards of directors are going to have to pay more attention to this. It's going to affect audit committees in particular are going to have to spend time thinking about it, talking to the internal audit folks about it, making sure they get presentations from management. They need to talk to the auditors. Auditors are going to have to understand what their clients are doing with respect to AI and how they're going to adjust their audit routines, their audit procedures, their risk assessment procedures, their risk identification procedures, what they're going to do to deal with this AI, because it's going to be much more complicated. It shows you how important AI can be, and how important the controls over it are. But there's no question that it's going to be important, and that accounting students need to understand it.
I mean, I think AI is really helpful even just to get your base foundation.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you're looking at a particular topic and you want to learn about it, it can, instead of making you click through 20 different, sites to find something, it'll summarize it. So it brings you up the learning curve a bit that way. So it's a different type of data analytics too. So you talk AI, but I think data analytics is even more important too. And I know you guys in school or in college, University of Akron and other places are doing that a lot more, which is something that I envy a bit because I don't have time to go back and do that.
Mm-hmm.
So, the things that, you guys are learning and you're coming out, that's going to be extremely valuable to you. And you become that much more valuable to your client because you know how to do things. You know how to do it quicker, faster, what have you. I think one thing to be cautious of on that, though, is you still need to first understand the basics so you know why you're doing something. And then if you do get something that's generated either out of AI or out of data analytics, you got to understand, wait a minute, what did this actually do? Because sometimes a report might come through and you look at it and you think it says X, but really if you go back and figure something out, either there's an error in the coding, that it really is an X, it's Y. So just really important to not lose sight of that, lose the auditability of that, which again, auditors are going to have to spend the time learning that as well. They can't just take it on face value. And sometimes I call those like the duh questions. It's like you think that, oh yes, of course this adds up, but if you don't test that, like if you're an auditor, you come and you get a big schedule and no one ever tests it or foots it to the bottom, and if it's wrong, how do you defend yourself on that? You didn't even add it up. You didn't even check it. So I think, AI data analytics can put you into harm that way, but it's also doing a lot of great service. So just be careful how you use it.
All right, wrapping up with the question here. So let's circle back to your time at Akron. How did Akron give you the tools to have the successful careers you have had? And what advice would you give to students today?
Well, first of all, I would go back to once again, I always think of Dr. Richard Roberts and Orville Keister because they were helpful and inspirational in a lot of ways, and I learned a lot from both of them. I should also say, I wish I could I cannot remember the name of the teacher. I really can't. I had a cost accounting course, and I enjoyed it. I didn't think I fully appreciated it at the time how it was going to be helpful to me. But when I fell into the government contract situation that I did, the government contract consulting, it turned out to be that understanding cost accounting and some of the concepts, the fundamental concepts, became very important because of the need to gather information to determine what the cost of a particular activity was and so on. So that was very beneficial to me. But I think Akron gave me a good accounting education.
And I would say, in terms of preparing me, thinking about the classes, they weren't cakewalks. They were hard. I often, kind of took the harder classes too, which, maybe some late night studying. Maybe I wish I wouldn't have done that, but I think they served me well. The professors are approachable, or were approachable back then as well. And then the community, involvement with the community, whether it's through Beta Alpha Psi activities, accounting association activities, the Toastmasters, which you need to bring back, by the way.
Put that on the list.
Yes. Just making those connections and knowing that you have the foundation to go forward. And, being in Cleveland with Arthur Andersen, I was doing fine. Then I moved to D.C., and it's like, gosh, I went to University of Akron. How am I going to measure up, to these other folks who might have gone to schools that were 3-4 times more expensive and all, and might have had the Ivy League, label put on it. But I think history has shown, Bill and I both, that, the University of Akron education served us quite well.
Yes, absolutely.
And we made it through, and, I think we hold our own.
Yeah.
I would say, too, that always think of yourself, you're always learning.
Yeah.
You come out, you get your degree, if you take the CPA or CMA exam, you pass it, but every time you're in a new position, you're learning, and don't don't be afraid to learn. Just absorb whatever you can at that level. I think sometimes, people come out right away and they want to do the work that somebody's been working out there for 5 years
Yes.
on, and maybe they could, but the stuff that you would normally do through years 1 through 4 are very, very valuable. And if you don't know those basics, you're going to have trouble somewhere
You will.
down the line. So if you're auditing and you're stuck auditing cash, oh, this is really boring. It's important, and it's important you understand the process, you understand the company. If you're doing consulting and somebody says, go review these tens of thousands of emails, oh, how boring is that? But that's where you find the stuff. So just keep an open mind and absorb, and, try to be as helpful as you can to the person, who's next to you.
And to wrap up one more time, if you could summarize everything advice to students now and future entry workers in one sentence, what would you say?
Work hard and be smart about it. I don't know what else you can say.
Yeah?
Work hard and be smart about it.
Foolproof.
Yeah.
And I would say, look for opportunities. When an opportunity is presented to you, go for it.
Definitely. I like to say get comfortable being uncomfortable, because a lot of new things you're going to do are uncomfortable, and you're never going to get anywhere if you don't do the uncomfortable things.
That's true.
And that never ends.
Yeah?
Same thing here.
No,
All
that's
right.
exactly right. I would agree with that.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you guys for your time so much today. It was very insightful. Listen to you and your careers. Thank you for joining us on the first ever School of Accountancy podcast. How's it feel?
Very good.
Very
It's
good.
great, and thank you,
Yes, thank
for,
you.
yeah, for Jules for setting this up with us too.
Yes, thank
And,
you to Jules.
Thank you,
we're-
Jules.
We're both on the accounting advisory board, and so seeing the great things that she's doing and working to build that up, and with all the community involvement on that
Yeah,
as
it's
well.
terrific, Jules. Thank you so much.
All right. That's great. Thank you guys very much one more time. I think this camera, it pans this camera over here. We should wave.
Oh, okay, sorry.
Okay.